On camera.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you're in the sanctuary or on Zoom, welcome to the Bedford Lyceum, brought to you by First Parish in Bedford, Unitarian Universalist here in Massachusetts. The Bedford Lyceum is a community lecture series covering a wide variety of topics, from medicine to music, world affairs to financial investment, travelogues to poetry, and all talks are free, open to the public, and pre-registration is not required. This presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube within the next few days. For the YouTube link, feel free to email me at mountainbreeze52@gmail.com. It'll also be published in the community newsletter. Before we start, if you do not want to have your full name shown in Zoom, feel free to rename yourself with your first name and last initial. And we ask that everyone who's on Zoom, as well as in the sanctuary, remain on mute or silent until the questions and answers portion of our presentation. And thank you. Finally, our presenter has a lot to share, so we might run a little bit over, but we hope to stay within the time limit for the Q&A portion after the talk. Today we're delighted to have Brad Connor join us. Just a little background on our speaker. Brad Connor has been the music and choral director here at First Parish in Bedford for over 18 years. He has a vibrant enthusiasm for all genre of music, from classical to contemporary, to jazz, to blues, to the Great American Songbook, to Broadway film music, to classic rock, and to all good music. Brad has multiple degrees from West Virginia University, including musicology, vocal and piano performance, and teaching. And with Ben Sears, Brad has done dozens of productions in New England to the delight of audiences. During the COVID lockdown, Brad used his time to work on piano works by Schubert and Beethoven. And since then, he's resumed his professional performing life as a conductor, pianist, singer, and lecturer here at First Parish, Beacon Hill Seminars, and with the Cambridge Center for Adult Ed. Today, Brad will be speaking to us about the life and times and music of Ralph Vaughan Williams. This year marks the 150th anniversary of Vaughan Williams' birth, and this concert honors his contributions to the Renaissance of English music. It's my pleasure to introduce Brad Connor.
Thank you, Ellen. So first things first. So Ellen already mentioned that I'm here to present a presentation on Vaughan Williams. His first name actually was pronounced Rafe rather than Ralph. So it's Ralph Vaughan Williams. And, you know, I have to ask the question here, does anyone know who Ralph Vaughan Williams is? You people on Zoom, you people out there, do you know who he is? So I am going to say most likely you do know who he is, but you just don't know who he is. And let me explain on that. He was involved in helping to publish the English hymnal in 1906. He was the musical editor from 1904 to 1906, and he wrote a little tune that I'm going to play for you, and you're going to be like, oh, that's Vaughan Williams, and that way you know who we're going to talk about. So I'm going to pull up my slideshow here, and let's see if we've got that going. And so this is Ralph Vaughan Williams, a nice profile. Yes, it's his 150th anniversary of his birth. And so I'm going to get the, oh yeah, here we go. It's wanting to, there we go. Okay, here we go. I have a feeling you're going to know this. can sing along if you want. That's what the words are for. So was I right that, in fact, you do know this? And I have someone here who's already asked the question, why is it called sine nomine, which basically means without name? Because when Vaughan Williams wrote that in 1906, he said he couldn't come up with a name, so he didn't give it one. And it's called sine nomine. And so you often hear that on the Sunday after November 1st, assuming November 1st doesn't hit on a Sunday, which is All Saints' Day in usual Christian theology and in the liturgy. You're going to hear a lot of music today, but I am going to give you a little bio on who he is. So he was born in Down Ampney, Gloucestershire, England, on October 12th, 1872. His father was a vicar in a family of jurists. His uncle was a lawyer, a well-respected lawyer, and his grandfather was a judge. It's his mother's side of the family that's most interesting. His mother was one of the heirs of the Wedgwood china fortune. You remember Wedgwood, right? I have a bunch of it at home. And that's where a lot of the money came from. But in fact, his uncle was Charles Darwin, which I find very fascinating. Anyway, at age 5, he started taking piano lessons, and he wrote his very first composition. So how many kids do you know writing compositions at 5 years old? He went to a boarding school, and then as a teenager, he went to a famous public school in England called Charterhouse. He was an average student, but while at Charterhouse, he organized his first concert. So between being a musician and organizing concerts, I relate to this. This is what he did. It became a lifelong passion for him. It was also the time that he started to question his religious beliefs. While he continued to attend church regularly, lest he upset his family, in later years he said, "I'm no big fan of religion. An organist job I had in South London was a drudge, and by the time I was at school, Charterhouse, I'd become an atheist." What would you expect when your great uncle is Charles Darwin? I was 10 when he died. He used to study nature in the fields around the house, and I learned to read from the same book as he'd used, Cobwebs to Catch Flies, published in 1797. It might have been him who colored in the illustrations in the book I had. I asked Mother about Great Uncle Charles, and she said, well, the Bible says God made the world in 6 days. Uncle Charles thinks it took a lot longer, but we needn't worry about it because it's equally wonderful whatever way it was done. In his older years, in my older years, Vaughan Williams, I would say my attitude evolved more into a tolerant and a cheerful agnosticism. Simultaneously, he became an ardent socialist. Despite being brought up with, as they say in the vernacular, a silver spoon in his mouth, he felt very early on that there was enough of everything to be shared amongst everyone. He next attended the very prestigious Royal College of Music. It was there that he truly learned his craft of composing. His family didn't have much faith in his musical talents and felt that he probably wouldn't be able to make a living from being a composer or a working musician. So, to satisfy them, he left the Royal College of Music and went to Trinity College in Cambridge for general studies in history, philosophy, and music. I look at that and I think, history, philosophy, and music. Yeah, that's going to make you a lot of money. But anyway, it was there that he studied with some of Britain's most notable composers of the time, Charles Hubert, Hastings Perry, and Charles Wood. You may know Perry from hymns like Jerusalem and anthems like I Was Glad or Blessed Pair of Sirens. And Wood, while being a notable conductor, wrote many arrangements of orchestral works of other pieces, but he probably is best remembered because he wrote the standard arrangement that we still use of Ding Dong Merrily on High. That's Charles Wood. After graduating from Trinity, Vaughan Williams didn't care what his family thought, and he went back for further studies at the Royal College of Music. He married his first wife, Adeline Fisher, in 1897. At the turn of the century, he began to develop his interest in English folk music. In 1902, he was making a modest living by composing and lecturing. And while lecturing, he met Lucy Broadwood. I don't expect you to know who she was, but she was a devoted amateur folk song collector, and he was so inspired by her efforts that in 1903-1904, he also began to collect copies of English folk songs, which would later turn into the volume, The Oxford Book of Carols. Now, I'll show you here because I've got my video on, and also here to everyone. So the Oxford Book of Carols, what is that? It's this tome that every choral director, no matter what religion, ends up with a copy of this. Because in it are every carol and some non-carols that Vaughan Williams himself and a couple of assistants collected, and it was the first time it had been put together. Otherwise, much of this would have been lost. So, one of the most notable tunes he found was named after the place he discovered it in, Forest Green, in Surrey. Yeah, there we go. It originally had different lyrics, but Vaughan Williams decided to wed the famous words of the American longtime rector of Trinity Church in Copley Square, Boston, with the tune. And do you know who that head of Trinity was? Massachusetts Diocese, Bishop of the Massachusetts Diocese. His statue is down there, Phillips Brooks. And so he wedded it to some very famous words, "O little town of Bethlehem." And so, yes?
Do you have a window open over your Zoom share? It's blacked out.
Yeah, it's blacked out because it's a video.
Okay.
So I'm getting ready to show the video. Is that what the chat's all about up here? Yeah, everyone, just be patient. Trust me. I'll get you there. Yeah, there we go. Screen is blacked out. Yep, still is. I promise I'll get you past that. And what I'm going to play for you is, while it originally was a folk tune, he put "O Little Town of Bethlehem," he set the words to that, and then also there's another hymn setting called "All Beautiful March of Days," which here at First Parish we always do the second Sunday in June. It's the last Sunday that we have before the summer break. And we always do it. Here is a version of Forest Green, and this is a particularly lovely arrangement that was done in 2019. It's a string arrangement, and it's very much in the style of Vaughan Williams. Oh, see if I can get it going again. Oh. Like I said at the beginning, Vaughan Williams was music editor of the English hymnal and published in 1906. Notice the date on that was 1906. He continued to organize concerts and compose up through the beginning of the First World War. He was in his early 40s. Yes, early 40s when he enlisted in the war effort on behalf of Britain in World War I, and he became an orderly, in their terms, or as we'd say, an ambulance driver, in the Royal Army Medical Corps. And in 1917, he was promoted as lieutenant as part of the Royal Regiment of Gunners and Artillery. I had to write that down to make sure that, in fact, I knew I was going to say it properly. And so here is a picture of him at that point in his 40s. And let's see. Yep, okay, there we go. The horrors of war never left him. It influenced almost everything he did for the rest of his life. Like many, he spoke about his experiences rarely, and when he did, he was adamant that it was destruction beyond imagination. Many of us know the story of that first Christmas Eve on the battlefields in France when soldiers from both sides sang Silent Night across no man's land. And then they ended up fraternizing for the rest of the night. That was the last time they were allowed to do that. Both sides freaked out when that happened, said this can never happen again. And it was, for every Christmas throughout both world wars, a conscious choice that that would never happen again. While the commanders of the opposing sides were disturbed, Vaughan Williams was inspired. And he wrote 9 arrangements of carols for men's voices. None of them are particularly complex. A lot of them are what you call strophic. Strophic means that it's got verses, one after another. It's like a hymn. It just keeps going on and on like that. I'm going to play you 2 examples. One you're going to know, and one you might not know. So let me gear that up. And here we go. I bet you know this one.
The first Noel, the angel did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep, in a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel.
So, as you have noticed already, I played multiple tunes for you that, in fact, you already knew, right? So you already know Vaughan Williams, and he is going to get even more prominent here. I got it restarted. In that this is a tune you might not know, but in fact, it is, the reason I chose it was I think that it is an incredibly beautiful tune. So here we go. Really a beautiful tune. Again, it probably would have been lost without Vaughan Williams. So Vaughan Williams never let go of his passion for English folk music. And in fact, it inspired scholarship around the world and a similar renaissance in the United States when a guy named John Jacob Niles, not Jingleheimer Schmidt, but Jacob Niles, was simultaneously doing the same type of research in the Appalachian Mountains here in the United States. We can thank Niles, having been inspired by Vaughan Williams, for rediscovering such wonderful tunes as I Wonder as I Wander Out Under the Sky. That had gone totally into the hills of Appalachia and only came out when Niles pulled it into his collection. And he also discovered another tune that came over with early English immigrants that had been lost. On the first day of Christmas, my true love sent to me a pie. I know, it's sort of like, oh, now we can't get rid of it, right? But in fact, that had gone into the hills of Appalachia, and it was Niles who decided to bring it out. But again, he was inspired by Vaughan Williams scholarship in England. So we have Vaughan Williams in an indirect way to think about that. But while Vaughan Williams retained his passion for folk music, he also developed a new passion for music from Tudor times. Perhaps you don't know it, but it's widely believed that Greensleeves was written by none other the infamous King Henry VIII for one of his wives. Maybe even Anne Boleyn, who knows? He had so many of them you can't keep track. But in any case, we know it more as the tune for the Christmas carol, What Child Is This Who Laid to Rest? And Vaughan Williams loved the tune so much that he wrote a fantasia on it for flute and string orchestra. And so I'm going to play that for you. It's such a beautiful piece. And here we go. I have no idea who Feline 2018 is. I got that off YouTube. And so, as we saw, that piece was written in 1934, and we're now going to go backwards to 1928. Because if we're going to touch on Christmas music here, then if we go back to 28, Vaughan Williams wrote an arrangement of a folk tune that he knew from childhood, the Wassail Song. Anyone here know the Wassail Song? Out there on Zoom land, do you know the Wassail Song? It's one of my favorites. This is specifically his arrangement and one of my absolute favorite arrangements of any Christmas carol ever. It tells a great story, and you know, it starts with the idea that the wassailers are coming in and they're far away and they move so that you're in the midst of them, and then they all walk away from you. So, you know what? Let's all get a little bit tipsy here and go a wassailing. And I just love it. You know, Christmas carols by nature are supposed to have at least a religious tinge to them. And I'm sorry, talking about, drinking wassail and going from door to door and the maid that trips back the lock in order to let her boyfriend in. Somehow, it's a different type of religious connotations, isn't it? I just love it. So I'm planning to do it here on Christmas Eve. So, it's not just because it's the Unitarians like wassail. It's because I just love that arrangement. So now I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of Vaughan Williams himself. So this is Vaughan Williams conducting around 1950. These are pictures of as he got older. And here is a picture of him with his second wife, Ursula, in the early 50s. He met Ursula in 1938, but he didn't marry her until 1953. While both of his wives were musical muses to him, it was Ursula that proved to be a major inspiration in the latter part of his life. So now what we're going to do, and it's going to be a black screen, I warn you, we're going to move to our last musical piece of this lecture, the Fantasia on Christmas Carols. So, as you've already heard, he did a beautiful Fantasia on Greensleeves. And of course, two of his most famous and beloved pieces are Fantasias. Again, another one of my all-time favorite pieces, the Fantasia on a theme of Thomas Tallis for string orchestra. If you don't know it, go into YouTube and put Vaughan Williams, Thomas Tallis, and listen to a recording. It's a pretty spectacular piece. And then his other most famous piece is called The Lark Ascending, which tells you everything that the piece is about. And it, too, is sort of a free Fantasia form. So if you're going to ask me what is a Fantasia, so it's not a Disney movie. Yes, it was, but it's not what that's about. It basically means you're not bound by any structured musical form. You can be as free as you want, and sometimes it's a rambling piece that goes straight through from start to finish, like Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. While that's a rhapsody, it's called a rhapsody, it's really a fantasia. It starts at the beginning and sort of does what it wants to do whenever it wants to do, and then it gets to the end. So fantasia, rhapsody, they're sort of close cousins. It could be a theme followed by a set of variations. That's what the Fantasia on Greensleeves was. But in the case of the Fantasia for Christmas Carols, it's an episodic piece of 4 Christmas carols, one after another, with quotes from other carols like you've already heard. So listen for the first Noel, right? And then Virgin Most Pure is in there, da 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 dum, right? And then you've also got the wassail song, da 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 dum. That's in addition to the 4 main carols. And those extra 3 are sort of hidden along the way. So let's listen and just sit back and enjoy the Fantasia for Christmas Carols. I keep saying they're favorite pieces because they are. I'm going to stop it for a second because I see in the chat that people are asking a lot of questions here. Oh, they couldn't hear. Have you fixed that?
It was quiet. That's all we had.
Yeah, it's very quiet. Okay, so we'll come back to the questions later. Let's keep going.
Next thing which to you I'll tell. Woman was made with man to dwell.
And you can ignore that date on the end of it because it was somebody's Christmas card to someone else, which is why it has that date. I'm going to show you, to close up here, a couple of portraits of Vaughan Williams. These were started before he died, and they were finished after he died by the painter Sir Gerald Kelly. They're lovely portraits, although I think they make him look a bit like Jabba the Hutt. I'm not sure they're very flattering, but, you know, they're nice portraits, and frankly, I prefer to remember him this way. I think that's a much better picture. It was taken in the year of his death, and he died on August 26, 1953. And this is one of the last portraits taken of him. So that is Ralph Vaughan Williams. And let's find out if anyone has any questions, either here on Zoom. Let's look in the chat and see what people were saying. Right, so someone said no sound, and then someone came back and said it's just very quiet. Fine, they got that. And then, right, and someone was asking about, was that John Langstaff singing, who's Langstaff was the founder of Revels, in case you didn't know that. And yes, that was him being the soloist. And so anyway, that's everything with the questions on here on chat. So if you have any questions you want to push on chat, or anyone here, do you have any questions about Vaughan Williams? We can either pass the mic around to you, or you can certainly come up. Anyone out there? We'll get to you on Zoom land in a second. Okay, so Patrick, we'll bring the mic over to you and have you ask your question.
Thank you. That was very interesting. One of my favorite pieces altogether is The Lark Ascending, and I just wonder if you could tell us anything in background about that piece.
Well, so Vaughan Williams was a humongous, I'm not going to say naturist because that means he was a nudist, and he may have been for all I know, but he, from very early on, he was very much into nature in the same way that Beethoven was when he wrote his Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral Symphony. He would go out for long walks, and if you've ever known someone who's English, they don't just go out for a quick walk around the block, they go out for hours walking. And that was one of the things he would do. He would go out and he would walk from town to town to town. Even into the 1940s, he was pretty healthy still. And one day he happened to have been out walking, and guess what? He heard a lark, and it inspired him, and he went back and decided to write an entire piece about the experience. It's as simple as that. Anyone else here have any questions? Okay, Rich, so we'll get to you in Zoom land right after this. So Rich Dougherty, there you go.
Vaughan Williams was noted, I believe, I think you mentioned this, for his support of scholarships and students in scholarship. Are there any music schools that are named after him someplace in the world?
Not that I know of. I do know that at the Royal College of Music, they have a plaque to him up on the wall, and I think they have the Vaughan Williams Scholarship for Notable Composing, which, interestingly enough, wasn't instituted until something like 15 years ago. Vaughan Williams' music has had a rough time of it, in that he writes in his own unique way, and as academician people wanted, something more adventurous and dissonant and all that, they tended to leave him behind. But it's fascinating that in the last 10 years, his stock has gone up. And so all of a sudden we're hearing more and more Vaughan Williams. When I was going to college, they asked, can you name who the most notable British composers are? Now, Now I would include Vaughan Williams in that, but we're talking about, in the 80s. No, it was Handel and maybe Elgar. Vaughan Williams didn't even chart.
I was going to ask you that when you were studying musicology in West Virginia, he probably wasn't on the list.
No, the only thing, interestingly enough, my introduction to Vaughan Williams was probably what many of your introduction was. For all the saints, I'd sung that in church. I'd sung, "Oh, little town of Bethlehem." I'd sung that in church, so I knew Vaughan Williams. And then the Fantasia on Greensleeves, the Boston Pops used to do it every year, and I had it on a Christmas album. Those were my three introductions. It wasn't in music school because, of course, good music wasn't being written in England. It was being written in Germany or France. And then if you went to England, like I said, it was Handel or Elgar, and that was all you got. So he actually has gotten more well-known the further we've gotten away from his death. Anyone else here? So let's go on Zoom land and see if anyone has a question there. So I see that Dorothy Africa has a question. She's got her hand raised. So Dorothy, let's have you unmute yourself, or Webb, do we have to unmute her?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. My favorite Vaughan Williams piece is the Fantasia on Thomas Tallis, because Tallis is a favorite of mine. But Tallis isn't Tudor. He's not traditional English carol. So why do we know why Vaughan Williams chose that particular focus, or did he just like that Tallis piece?
Oh no, I mean, he actually was very intentionally chose that because Thomas Tallis was Tudor music. He wrote during Tudor times, and that was his other big interest. English folk music and Tudor music, and so Tallis was someone he respected very much. One thing about the sound of Vaughan Williams, I think I'm going to dig myself into a hole here trying to explain it. In conventional Western music, we have major and minor, right? Does everyone sort of understand the idea of major and minor music? Major music is sometimes labeled as happy, and minor is labeled as sad. That's a bad label because, in fact, minor music can also be mysterious. And Vaughan Williams tended to write in modes, modal music. Modal music is different. If you're looking at a keyboard and you happen to know C major, a C major scale on the keyboard, and you go C to C, if you choose any other key as the starting point and end on that same key 8 notes later and then come back down, that's modal music. Because when we do da 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 da, right? That's what we hear. But modal music shifts that. It shifts it up, and please don't ask me to sing a modal scale. It's tough to do that. But what it is, it still has a beginning and an end, but it doesn't have the same finality. And it allows you to float around. And his music has that quality a lot of time of floating around. And he loved writing in modes. A lot of carols, Christmas carols, we've gotten so used to it. Da 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 da. It sounds like it's minor, but in fact it's modal. And so it's slightly different, but it gave him a lot more freedom to write the way he wanted. But to answer Dorothy's question, Tallis, he chose it because he loved Tudor music, and Tallis was one of the main composers of the Tudor era. Any other person there in Zoom land have any questions? Wow, no one has any questions. So I'm glad we're all experts now on Vaughan Williams, right? So I want to thank everyone who showed up here on Zoom. Oh, wait, here, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. Do we know what that is? Right, okay, there we go. And there we go. So Dorothy, you said, just to talk about Tallis for a second, so Tudor music started with Henry VIII, and so we're talking about in the 1400s. and then goes all the way through the end of Gloriana, which is up to essentially 1600. So Tallis was well within Tudor music. So just to put that in context. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, right. Rich?
When a composer does a fantasia, does he have to get permission from all the people he's borrowing?
So we're being asked here for a fantasia, does a composer have to get permission in order to borrow all those tunes? And the answer is, well, in the case of Christmas carols, who knows who wrote those? They're long dead, so no, you don't have to. There are fantasia on songs by Elton John. Yeah, you would have to. There are fantasias on songs by the Beatles. Yeah, you'd have to. But Vaughan Williams didn't write those. So it just depends. Copyright, it's okay to borrow tunes as long as they're not in copyright. And Christmas carols are long out of copyright. The arrangements, though, I'd like to make a distinction. The arrangements are not out of copyright. So while the arrangement that the choir here at First Parish is going to sing on Christmas Eve is going to do the Fantasia on Christmas carols, and they're going to do the Gloucestershire Wassail. The Gloucestershire Wassail, that arrangement was written in the 30s, so the copyright on the arrangement still goes, but the original tune is well out of copyright. So you get involved in all that. That's very technical. So that's it. So Ellen, do you have any other questions to close up here or any comments?
No, I don't have any more comments. I just want to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon and for this wonderful talk. And before we leave, I just wanted to give a shout out, a million thanks to our technical crew making this whole series possible. I know I'm going to miss out on somebody's name, but Webb Tilney, Jerry Ross off in Zoomland, Bob Dorr today, and let's see, Bob Bass, who am I missing? John McLean. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, and have a great evening.
And happy holidays of choice, everybody. Enjoy your music. Thank you.
Okay.